important. But what are some of those differences between the two? Nature and imagination are important in both groups. What's different? Interpretations on some levels, and how were the interpretations somewhat different? And it's a perspective type of thing. It's a way of looking at the world.
I'm not sure, but maybe that's like whole. It's because I don't know. But it's transcendentalists, I think that they rely more on nature because like they think it's like a way to get outside like your daily life, and that I think that's different.
The nature, I think, sometimes is much more explored in the Romanticism on some levels as an actual place to be, whereas the Romantics in general, the poetry, oftentimes just use nature as almost as a literary device. Beautiful, inspirational, but Emerson's like, get out there in nature, actually see how it can transform you, and the Romantics are just like, oh, nature, that's nice. All right, that's kind of an exaggeration, but erase that part of it. Now, with poet Romanticism, there's perspective. Which of the two groups is looking towards the future and looking at how man can be better? Yes, the transcendentalists, the transcend to rise up beyond oneself, and the Romantics, where are they looking at the ideal world?
The present.
No, the present's the city, the Industrial Revolution. The present is kind of depressing.
Past.
Past. Remember, they're idolizing the medieval era, castles, knights.
Isn't that the Puritans?
No, Puritans religion.
What's it?
Puritans, the Puritans didn't like nature. They saw nature as very threatening. Nature is chaotic. Nature is the wilderness. Nature is where the devil is.
So they were what?
Puritans themselves were trying to civilize chaos. And that's why civilization, hard work, education were so important to them, because they did not want to be savage. There's a famous piece by one of the big Puritan writers of this time and ministers. I can't remember his name. Not the Reverend Hale. A different guy. Anyway, he observed, I think, one day, like a dog taking a piss on the side of a building or something like that. And just was disgusted because he realizes as humans, we also have bodily needs. And he didn't like that because we're still so animal-like on some level. And he wrote this, kind of this small essay about that. And for the Puritans, there was something almost depressing and gross about being an animal on some level. When they were trying so hard, I think, to move towards God and what was holy and get away from just the things we don't like about ourselves, being unclean, being dirty, being like a slave to our passions on some level. And that's what the Puritans really wanted to transcend that themselves, I think.
And they about religion.
Yeah, very much about religion. Very much Calvinistic.
What? Oh.
They were Calvinistic.
No, Puritan.
Subscribed to the philosophies of John Calvin, predestination, the idea that God has already chosen whether you are saved or you have grace or whether you're damned. It goes back to Edward's sermon, that sinner's in the hands of an angry God, that we read. Yeah.
We put that in the essay.
Yeah. Depends. There will be some short answer questions that ask about those works. Yeah, very much so. Puritans and any of the works that we've read you can use.
Romanticism.
Yep, Devil and Tom Walker's Romanticism.
And what about?
We read two things by Edgar Allan Poe: Longfellow's *The Cross of Snow*, The Devil and Tom Walker. Yeah, that's one of the Poe works. Yeah, those are the four. I think those are the main four of Romanticism that we've read.
Okay, which one?
The Raven, House of Usher.
Whose wife died? Yeah. That's The Cross of Snow.
Cross of Snow.
That one's from Romantic.
Yeah, all four of
Cross of
those.
Snow.
Longfellow.
No me acuerdo.
What about this one? Mercury and Old Creek Bridge.
Creo que era el de la esposa que se roba el...
Technically, that's realism.
El de Cross of Snow.
Yeah, and there will be nothing to do with Creek Bridge on the final. It's a great story.
Yeah.
And it's psychological, but it's Something that we didn't do.
It had nothing to do with
Why?
Not really. I mean, only in the sense that Bierce is writing in the generation after the Romantics and is definitely kind of influenced in a different direction from it. I think Bierce is very much influenced by Poe's works, or at least some of the stuff at that time. But he's writing, a good 30, 40 years later.
Mister, the four of Romanticism were Raven, House of Usher, Cross of Snow.
Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving.
That one, the devil, was the one that he took a shortcut in the woods.
And the devil was there with the trees, with the guys.
How was he called, or what? The black. What was his
They
nickname?
call him a black man, I think.
See,
Oh,
House of
they called
Usher?
him.
Cross of Snow.
American. It's an American romanticism.
Raven y Devil and Tom.
He was
Old Scratch.
and
That's what it was.
the old scratch.
Romanticism.
Some of you wanted to talk about Poe, I think.
The pendulum, we didn't read it.
We didn't read Pit and the Pendulum.
Mister.
You must have read on your own.
Mister. Really quick.
Omer.
Tranqui. The one about the house that was burning and
Yeah, I'll get to that. In just,
El de mi
I'll get to
hermana.
that in a moment. We'll talk about Puritans in a second.
De mi
Alright.
hermana.
Quickly, Poe. What do you want to know about Poe?
Vas.
You tell me. Why is Poe important, especially with the Romantics?
Which one?
En el folder rojo de character era.
Yes, in some ways.
Allá, en el piso.
He
Remember
lost his
Poe?
wife. I think it was.
Remember Paul?
Someone died
He
in his life.
eventually did, yeah.
Someone died in his
He
life.
married very young.
The character.
Or married a very young woman, but she eventually died, yes.
Es uno medio gordito, pero no tanto.
That was the Raven was.
Dice character era en
Not really
letra.
about his, no, it wasn't about his
No,
own
no,
life.
he was influenced.
No, ese no es.
I don't think she hadn't died when he wrote The Raven.
No,
No,
there's
Poe
one poem,
just-
which was a poem that he did after.
That's Longfellow is the one you're thinking about who wrote The Cross of Snow about
No,
his wife.
I know
that
that.
died.
Ah, yes. That.
Did Edgar Allan Poe also wrote a poem after the death of his wife?
I don't think so. I think The Raven was beforehand. I'm almost positive it was. Poe himself was just a man who was very much. If he lived today, he would have really been into horror movies. He just liked the supernatural, the grotesque, the dark side of life. The gothic, yeah, very much gothic. fiction.
Batman.
And Poe is influential on a lot of levels for horror as well as mystery and popularizing a lot of genres that are very popular today. He wrote one of the very first mystery stories as well in his time. But primarily it's that gothic fiction, that dark side, the dark imagination. And along with that, the supernatural. The Puritans themselves were scared of nature, and I think they were kind of superstitious. The supernatural scared them. Witches, devils, demons, spells, that kind of stuff freaked them out. They didn't like that at all. But in Poe's time, you're getting to an era where science is definitely kind of taking a foothold. People are more skeptical about that type of stuff, yet they're still fascinated by it. We go to horror movies today and supernatural movies, not because we believe that there are witches out there coming after us, but I think kind of in some way it's kind of fun to imagine that on some level. And I think that's what you're finally getting to an era in human history, at least in the US and Europe, where people can do that. There's enough skepticism and scientific background to say, this is interesting, let's explore this supernatural kind of evil side that doesn't really exist. Poe, anything else about Poe? And remember, The Raven and The Fall of the House of Usher, they're very much exploring loss, sorrow, and the mind on some level. Insanity and madness. Those are huge themes for Poe in particular. Romantics in general, I would say that kind of goes with the imagination on some level. Symbolism, I think symbolism is huge in the Romantics. I mean, think of the symbols of the Raven. Think of the symbolism in Longfellow's Cross of Snow. The Cross of Snow is not a supernatural poem. It's a very touching, it's a very touching poem about comparing a lost love to nature. But nonetheless, there's still a lot of symbolism in there and a lot of kind of imagination and emotion as well. And that's another huge one too, is emotion.
¿Qué tanto están haciendo ustedes?
And then the Devil and Tom Walker, definitely somewhat satirical, and I don't think we talked about the satire of it.
Yeah, with satire.
How many words did we?
Just the idea is mocking and ridiculing certain elements of society. Devil and
Like?
Tom Walker was. Devil, he was ridiculing greed, I think, on some levels, superstition, small-mindedness in people.
Like the fight with his wife and himself. That was
Yes, and even mocking, I think, relationships on some level as well.
Yeah, because like he kept like things from his wife and his wife from him.
Right. And there's that image of them fighting back and forth, and then her beating up the devil. And he's even ridiculing this concept, I think, of the devil. on some
Yeah,
level.
by his wife, like
Yeah. Very different from the Puritans who took that literally and seriously.
Writer's Guide.
What's next, Vale?
I put that up.
Where in the playwright it says that we need to identify, like, for the quotes of the crucible. Do we like need to identify who was the speaker and things like that?
I know.
No, okay.
It says quotes of.
The idea is then that you will be given. It's all short response. There's no matching or anything like that on this final. And so you might be given a prompt that says, take a. In fact, I think one of the essay prompts. Let me see.
Yes, about the crucible.
All right, so you might. Nope, we took that one off, I guess. All right, you might get a quote from the Crucible, but it'll be a fairly famous quote. I might suggest reviewing Spark Notes and just going back through and reviewing who the characters are in the Crucible. Spark Notes always talks about the significant quotations, but you should be able to remember the plot as well as kind of some of the themes that came out of it, though, too. I mean, what was the purpose of writing the Crucible? You know, what were the themes that were explored? What lessons are learned by the end? I think that's somewhat important.
When I was sick, the Crucible was on TV, and I watched
Omar,
it.
wow.
Did you like it? It's not. It's okay.
I don't like that.
We never watched the end here.
no dijo de que we should let off.
Just kidding.
Acá.
I think we do too. Oh, and we were running out of time with the Crucible too, because we had all those interruptions, and I was about going crazy.
Sí.
Alright.
Dos, tres o cuatro.
The Crucible is important because obviously that we spend a lot of time on that.
What's the purpose?
What is the purpose of the Crucible? What do you learn out of the Crucible?
I don't know.
Tell the
Okay.
Wasting time.
Truth is a huge theme in the Crucible.
Yes.
Yes, adultery on some level. And yeah, I think the Crucible kind of plays around with that idea of the scientific versus the very almost supernatural, superstitious mindset of this
Puritans.
very
Devotion to religion.
very devoted religious group.
Slavery bill about black people being.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, the slavery aspects in there as well, and just the hierarchy of people, you know. Power and power's another big theme, because suddenly powerless people, like the young girls, Abigail and her friends, gain the most power they've ever had in their lives, including power over the most powerful people in the play. And so that's definitely a huge issue as well.
And mass hysteria. Mass hysteria.
Erika,
Yes, and the idea of what hysteria is and how that
según yo
can
entendí
definitely
eso,
be a tool
tienes que acabarlo.
for evil.
Tipo, te lo va a checar.
And then, if you're thinking about Puritan writers,
That's what troubles me the most.
Estoy muy ocupada.
Completion,
Pero aquí tengo
do you want to talk about Puritan writers?
87.
No sabía, pero-
Yes.
Yo tampoco. Tú tienes que 99.
Troubles me the most.
It's crazy.
Knowing the Crucible should help you out pretty well.
No te ha subido nada para el Distinguish.
No, what I like just
No creo.
don't like at all is the speech from
I just